There is a specific kind of violence in Avatar, Fire and Ash that feels startling. We aren't watching the noble, graceful combat of the forest Amatakya or the fluid, synchronized movements of the reef Metkayina. We're watching something jagged. We are seeing the Na'vi stripped of their spiritual elegance and reduced to raw, desperate survival. When the Mangkwan tribe, the Ash people, first burst onto the scene, looking like they walked straight out of a horrorscape rather than a fantasy adventure, I sat up in my seat. I thought finally James Cameron is taking the safety rails off. He is showing us the ugly side of Pandora. And then the movie kept going and going and going. And the initial spark of, wait, this is new, slowly suffocated under the weight of a franchise that seems terrified to actually change. This film is a paradox. It is a visual masterpiece trapped inside a narrative disaster. It is a spectacle that I saw in Dolby 3D, and let me tell you, the depth and the particle effects are staggering. It creates a window into another world that feels tactile enough to touch. But what happens when you climb through that window and realize you've just walked into the exact same room you left 2 years ago? Today we're dissecting James Cameron's Avatar, Fire and Ash. We're going to break down the screenplay, the stunning visuals, and the baffling structural choices that left me checking my watch. The big question we need to answer in the comments today is this. Is James Cameron actually building a mythology here? Or is he just remixing his greatest hits because we keep buying tickets? Let's get into it. To understand where Fire and Ash stumbles, we have to look at where it starts. The film wisely decides not to do a massive time jump, but drops us right into the emotional hangover of the Way of Water. We are with the Metkayina tribe, but the vibe is wrong. The tropical paradise feels oppressive now. Jake Sully and his family are grappling with grief of losing Neytiri. And the film does a solid job here of letting that grief breathe. It's heavy, it's palpable. I appreciate that the script didn't just wave a magic wand and say, everyone is sad, moving on. We see Neytiri and her arc is fascinatingly dark. She hasn't just developed a hatred for humans, she is festering in it. It's simmering, quiet rage that creates this incredible tension every time she looks at Spider. The movie sets up a complex family drama where the mother essentially wants to evict the adopted son because he reminds her of the enemy. That is rich, character-driven soil. But the peace doesn't last. A fleet of flying merchant ships arrive, and Jake, realizing his presence is a danger to the water tribe, makes the call to leave. They force Spider to leave the clan with them, and this convoy is almost immediately ambushed. And this brings us to the introduction of our new threat, the Mangkwan, led by Varang. And I have to give credit where it's due. This is the most interesting element the movie introduces. If the Omotakaya are the noble savages trope, the Mangkwan are the subversion of that. They reject the collective consciousness. They are brutal, dusty, and mean. They honestly reminded me of the troglodytes from Bone Tomahawk. Just a savage, feral version of the Na'vi that feels genuinely dangerous because they are unpredictable. They set fire to the ships, they loot the supplies, and in the chaos, the family is separated. This is a classic inciting incident. It shatters the status quo and physically separates our protagonists, forcing them into different concurrent storylines. Jake and Neytiri are isolated, the kids are captured, and the villain is on the hunt. But here's where the movie makes its boldest and arguably best narrative choice. Colonel Miles Quaritch and Lyle Wainfleet, our recurring blue bad guys, find Jake. But instead of an immediate deathmatch, the situation forces a ceasefire. They are both stuck in Mangkwan territory. They are both outnumbered, and shockingly, they have to work together to survive and find the children. This dynamic is gold. It's the enemy of my enemy trope, but it works because the shared history. Watching Jake and Quaritch trade tactical dialogue, covering each other's blind spots while hating every second of it. It provided this kinetic energy that the franchise desperately needed. It teased a shift in the genre, moving from an epic war movie to a gritty, behind enemy lines survival thriller. For about 30 minutes, I thought I was watching a completely different kind of Avatar movie, and I was all in. While the dads are playing Call of Duty in the jungle, we cut to Spider subplot, which dives headfirst into Cronenberg-level body horror that I absolutely kind of loved. Spider is separated, his oxygen mask battery dies, and we get this visceral sequence of asphyxiation. It's terrifying. He collapses, gasping for air that literally burns his lungs. But he doesn't die. Kiri does her space Jesus thing, connects her Q to the ground, and goes into a trance. We watch Spider's body is enveloped by Mycelial, this fungal network that wraps him like a cocoon. When he emerges, he can breathe. The film implies this organism inside him is reverse engineering the atmosphere for him. And disturbing yet fascinating. He has started to grow a neural queue on the base of his skull. This is the kind of sci-fi weirdness I appreciate. It respects the vibe of a living, evolving planet. It suggests that Pandora isn't just a location, it's an immune system that is actively adapting to the invasive species, humans, by integrating them. It's a brilliant expansion of the lore. It gives Spider a physical stake in this world that matches his emotional one. The children are trapped by the Ash Fighters. Quaritch and Jake catch up, and here the fragile alliance breaks, but not in the way you want. Quaritch, seeing an opportunity, teaches Varang, the leader of the Ash people, how to use human firearms. This is where the movie begins to slide from innovative sequel to bloated rehash. Now let's talk about the structure of the second act, because this is where the pacing becomes absolutely horrendous. We're dealing with a movie that is well over 3 hours long, and I have to be honest, it feels like an entire season of a television show crammed into a single theatrical setting. I recently watched Kill Bill: The Whole Bloody Affair, which is an hour and a half longer than this film. And yet that movie felt shorter. Why? Because Kill Bill had momentum. Fire and Ash has congestion. The problem lies in the villain dynamic. We had this fascinating setup with Varang as a feral anti-Eywa force of nature, but once Quaritch integrates with the tribe, the movie diminishes her. Instead of being a unique third party, she essentially becomes Quaritch's henchwoman. Quaritch basically makes Varang his crazy meth head girlfriend. They form an alliance, they start a romantic relationship, and he brings them flamethrowers. While the image of Navi wielding flamethrowers is undeniably metal, narrative-wise, it flattens the conflict. We are no longer dealing with a triangulation of forces. Humans versus Omaticaya versus Ash people. We are back to the binary good guys versus bad guys with guns. The plot mechanics here start to grind. Quaritch convinces the Ash people to go to the Metkaina village to demand Jake. Jake surrenders himself to avoid war. He and Spider are taken to Bridgehead City, the RDA base. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same rhyme. Capture, transport, escape. That we've seen before. The technical novelty of the first Avatar was revolutionary. The return to Pandora in the second film was admittedly a surprising delight because of water tech. But now the technical wizardry isn't enough to hide the fact that we are walking in circles here. This feels like a rehash of a movie from 2 years ago, just with a different color palette. There is, however, one moment in the thick of the second act that almost redeems the slog. It's the escape from Bridgehead City. Neytiri infiltrates the base. Ian Garvin, the biologist who opposed the RDA, steals a bulldozer to free Jake. It's chaotic, loud action set piece, but the climax of the sequence isn't an explosion, it's a moral choice. Spider escapes with them and acts as a human shield. He knows the RDA won't shoot him because he's valuable for research, specifically regarding the breathing, adapting organism inside of him. They get out, but the tension boils over. Jake and Neytiri argue over Spider's liability. He can help the humans develop a way for them to breathe on that planet, which will bring their doom. He is a weakness. For a fleeting moment, the movie goes to a very dark place. Jake Sully, the hero, the father, prepares to kill Spider. He actually contemplates executing this kid to save his family. This is a massive character beat. It challenges the very notion of Jake as a hero. It posits that war has eroded his morality to the point where pragmatism outweighs humanity. It's a daring narrative ledge to stand on, but the movie doesn't jump. Jake stops at the last minute. Neytiri, in a turn that feels slightly unearned given her venom in Act 1, finally accepts Spider. While I appreciate that they went there, it showed us the darkness in Jake. The resolution feels safe. It pulls the punch, and That is the recurring frustration of Fire and Ash. It constantly teases a more complex, darker, more subversive film, only to retreat back into the comfortable blockbuster formula that we know. So we head towards the third act. We have a captured family, a reluctant army, and a looming massive battle involving whales. The pieces are set for a finale that promises a spectacle, but the question remains, does the emotional payout justify the 3-hour journey to get there? And I'm not an Avatar head. I know there are people who live and breathe this lore, and I respect that deep dive. I get it. I feel that way about Aliens. But looking at this as an avid moviegoer and a lifelong James Cameron fan, I found myself checking out. The pacing is off. The villain dynamic collapsed. And we are barreling toward an ending that feels inevitable rather than earned. But let's talk about that ending, because if you thought the script was playing it safe so far, the third act is where the wheels completely come off the wagon in the most spectacular, confusing way possible. We enter the third act, and if you've seen the previous film, you essentially have a roadmap for this one. We return to the Metkayina village. We have the Tolkien Council, the giant philosopher whales, debating whether to intervene. Jake warns them of the massacre. They choose pacifism. It is a beat-for-beat reprise of the conflict of the Way of Water, just shuffled slightly to the left. The catalyst for the change, once again, is Loak. He brings Payakan, the outcast of the Tolkien, and Tanakh, a survivor of a human attack, to prove the threat is real. They reconsider. Jake rebonds with the apex predator Toruk, which is a cool, nostalgic play, sure, but it feels like we were just pulling action figures out of a toy box to see what sticks. Then comes the battle, and this is where the movie becomes visually overwhelming in the worst way. We have the RDA fleet, the Ash people, the Metkayina, the Tolkien, and the Omotakaya all colliding, and I'm probably butchering all these names, so I'm sorry. And it is chaos, and unlike the tightly choreographed destruction of the first film, this feels muddy. There are moments here, specifically when the Ash people and the Quaritch attack together, where the screen becomes a blur of blue and gray and fire. I hate to say it, but at times this was the same messy, weightless CGI sludge quality as the finale of Morbius. There is so much happening that nothing feels like it matters. Then the script decides to punish Ronal, the Metkayina queen played by Kate Winslet. She is mortally wounded and dies in childbirth during the assault. It is a harrowing, devastating scene. Neytiri has to take the baby, Prill, amidst the carnage. But I have to ask, to what end? This is feeling like misery porn now. I felt like the movie was screaming, look how sad war is, rather than earning the emotion through character choices. It's trauma for the sake of texture, and that let the bad taste in my mouth. To make matters worse, Neytiri is captured again. She is taken to the RDA ship. The repetition here is maddening. Neytiri is one of the most capable warriors in cinema history, yet the franchise seems determined to reduce her to a damsel in distress or a mother in mourning, stripping away her agency whenever the plot needs to move Jake from point A to point B. However, we do get a shift in the environment that wakes up the audience. The climax moves into the magnetic flux, a zone of floating mountains and distorted gravity. Visual-wise, this is Cameron flexing. The rocks are floating, the ships are crashing in slow motion, the physics of the battle change. Toruk destroys the lead ship, and we get our final confrontation. Jake versus Quaritch, thrown into the flux, fighting on debris suspended in air. The mechanics of this fight are sound. It is intimate, brutal, and personal. Spider follows them, and we get the payoff to the "Who is my father" arc. Spider shoots Quaritch. It's a moment of choice, rejecting the biological father who chose war for the adoptive father who almost killed him earlier. Quaritch falls but catches himself on a rock. Jake, in a moment of returning to humanity, pulls them both up, but Quaritch, he refuses the hand of grace. Outnumbered with Neytiri and the kids arriving, he looks at the family he can never be a part of, and he jumps. He drops into the flux. Now, the reference material theory suggests he isn't dead, and I agree. Nobody dies in these movies unless your contract expires. But structurally, this is a non-ending. It's a cliffhanger for Avatar 4. It resolves the immediate physical threat but leaves the emotional threat, ideology of Quaritch, plummeting into a void to be recycled later. The film ends on a metaphysical note. Spider and the clan connect to the underwater spirit trees. He meets the deceased Na'vi. Kiri introduces Spider to her mother Grace, and they initiate him into the Na'vi people. It's a beautiful sequence, drenched in bioluminescence and spiritual grandeur, but it feels like a prologue for the next movie rather than an epilogue for this one. So what was the movie actually about? If we peel back the layers of high frame rate action or repetitive plotting, what is the core frequency? The title Fire and Ash is obviously the central metaphor. The movie is trying to say that destruction, fire, is necessary precursor to new growth, ash. We see this in Neytiri's arc. She burns with the hatred for humans, for Spider, for war. That fire consumes her, but by the end, when she accepts Spider, she has burned away the prejudice and left the ash, the fertile ground for a new family dynamic. It's also about adapt or die. This is the through line for every character. Loak forces Tulkun to adapt their pacifism. Jake has to adapt his strategy from hiding to fighting. Spider literally adapts biologically to the planet via the mycelial network. The Ash people represent those who refuse to adapt to Eywa's harmony and chose a harder, sharper path. The most fascinating thematic thread, which I wish the movie explored more, is the idea of the mycelial network as a form of forced integration. Pandora isn't just a backdrop, it's an active participant. It is changing the humans. The fact that Spider grows a neural queue is genuinely Cronenbergian body horror disguised as a Disney fantasy. Is it just that you cannot conquer Pandora, you can only become Pandora? That is a terrifyingly and beautiful concept that gets buried under the noise of a standard bad guy wants to kill good guy plot. But does the movie succeed in conveying these themes? Barely. They are shouted at us in dialogue rather than woven into the subtext. It lacks the nuance of a film that trusts its audience. It feels like Cameron is so obsessed with the macro, the ecosystems, the technology, the franchise architecture, that he forgot the micro, the human and Na'vi heart. I wanted to love this, I really did. I walked into the theater ready to have my mind blown by the guy who made Terminator 2. Instead, I got a cinematic equivalent of drinking orange juice right after brushing my teeth. You know that feeling? It's technically fresh, but it's got all the right ingredients, but the flavor profile is just clashing. Avatar Fire and Ash is visually stunning disaster. It is a 5-star visual experience wrapped around a 1-star script. The good, the Ash people are terrifying, at least until they become generic henchmen. The mycelial body horror with Spider is one of the coolest sci-fi concepts the franchise has introduced. And the 3D, still the best in the business, especially on Dolby. The bad, it's shockingly repetitive. If I have to watch Neytiri get captured one more time, I'm going to scream. The pacing is atrocious. It feels like an entire season of a TV show crammed into a 3-hour movie. It's bloated, it's messy, and it refuses to let its characters grow because it needs to reset the board for the next sequel. It feels like a rehash of The Way of Water, which was already a rehash of Avatar. We are stuck in a loop. I'm giving Avatar Fire and Ash 2.5 out of 5 stars. It is a spectacle that leaves you starving. If you are a die-hard Avatar fan, you're already in the theater. For everyone else, you can wait for streaming. So that's where I landed. It's a frustrating watch because the potential for greatness is right there, buried under the ash of its own ambition. But I want to turn it over to you guys. Does this franchise feel like a movie series to you, or does it feel like a very expensive, very slow-moving TV show? Because to me, this felt like season 3 of a series rather than just a standalone film. Let me know what you think. Did the Ash people work for you, or were they just reskinned bad guys? And are we ever going to get a villain that isn't Quaritch? If you like this breakdown and want more honest deep dive critiques into horror, sci-fi, and cult cinema, do the thing. Smash the subscribe button, ring the bell, join the cult. We dissect the movies you love and the ones you love to hate. I'm Wes from Atomic Cult Media, and remember, on Pandora, no one can hear you scream because the movie is 3 hours long. See you in the next one.